My dears, thanks so much for hanging in with me. I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we're all good. I wanted to have a chat today with someone very specific in mind. One of our wonderful mappers in our tribe had reached out and was sharing about a documentary film that she is wanting to edit and score. And it sounds like this amazing project that she has been thinking about for some time and talking about for some time, but struggling to get into action. And when I was reading what she was sharing about that, I was reminded of a number of conversations that I have had with some of y'all who I've been coaching, where I think this is a really common issue. And I know it's something that I really dealt with before I got the courage to start Map Your Progress in earnest and start building what it was that I had in my head. So, very common thing. It's a very human thing. And I just wanted to kind of give you some assurances and some ideas of things that you can do to take your next right step and get going on whatever it is that you have been talking about. I'm going to reference my notes. Okay. So, I think that one of the things that I remember when I was in that position of talking about it and thinking about it, researching about it, but not really pulling the trigger and moving forward, was because I was scared. And so it certainly felt more comfortable to talk about what it was that I wanted to create than move forward into the scary part of creating something that I wasn't sure I knew how to create, first of all. Wasn't sure if it was going to work, if people would care about it, if they would pay money for it. And so Clever Brain loves that shit and loves to get stuck in those conversations in our head and asking those questions that don't necessarily need to be answered at this stage, but they can get us into distraction where we're thinking and talking. And when we start talking about it, then I think sometimes it can feel like we're making some progress and doing some things about it, which may be the case. It may be that talking and having conversations is moving you forward. And it can also get to the point where it starts to get in the way. And so for you, if you're in that position, what I would encourage you to do is really think about what it is that you are most afraid of doing. Because usually that's where that's where we most need to go. That's the bitch of it. It's like whatever it is that makes you want to throw up a little bit in your mouth, that's the direction that we need to start heading and start to address. So here's the thing. It reminds me of when I used to teach swimming lessons, and I would teach kids how to float and how to do some of the basic strokes. And then there would come a point where we needed to go to the deep end. Deep end was about 12 feet, and I imagine many of you can recall a time in your childhood when 12 feet of water seemed like the ocean and where sharks live and people die. So when dealing with kids who had been able to figure out how to float in shallower water, then it became a whole negotiation and a bit of a practice to have them trust that they could also float in deep water. So one of the things we would do with the kids would be to have them grab onto the wall where they could still stand and then sort of like inch themselves over into the deep end where they could not stand. And I think that's sometimes how it feels, right? Where we're kind of, when we're thinking creatively about a project or something that we want to do, we're in that place where we still have their feet on the ground. It's still familiar, talking about it. It's like, yeah, I can handle that. But then it's like, okay, no, but I'm getting out of my depth here. And so when we start to move out of our depth, out of that comfort zone, just breaking it down into the next thing that you can do. And if that is the equivalent of having your hands on the wall and kind of moving around, that's okay. That's a perfectly acceptable way of getting there. And so then we would have the kids holding onto the wall in the deep end. And then sometimes, they would be so scared of letting go and making that leap into trusting in their own abilities and their skills that we would need to break it down even further. So sometimes we just have them push their head underwater while holding onto the wall. Then, holding one hand and then the other hand and then pushing down and, trying to touch midway down the wall. We just make up things, frankly, to have them out of their head, out of the talking themselves out of it and why they couldn't do it, into their bodies, into action. So when I think of this situation with this lovely mapper who's a wonderful creative spirit, and when she looks at creating this documentary, of scoring this documentary, and then what it's going to take to, once she has that done, what it's going to take to market it and get it out into the world and so forth, that can feel, again, like big, deep water that she's not really sure how she's going to get across. And that's okay, because we don't necessarily need to get into all of that. It's just a matter of doing the next right step that you can do and trusting that you will have enough ability at each stage and each thing that you're going after to be able to see it through to the next piece. Okay, it's just like somebody doesn't learn to swim overnight. There's a lot of little places in between. This project, this creative thing that you may have in your head is not something that, is going to happen overnight. It's something that you will grow into. And in the process of pursuing that, you will become the person who can float in the deep water, who can swim across the deep end, who can be out there and be totally fine because you know that you have the strength and skill to be able to handle it. So let's bring it back to right now and where she's at right now and where a number of you may be at right now. And what it is that you can do. So, when you think about whatever it is that makes you want to throw up in your mouth, sorry, that's gross, but it's kind of how it is. So many people, I think, relate to that description. I want you to break it down into what it would look like if you were to take action coming from love versus taking action out of fear or, shooting all over yourself like, well, I should do this and I should do that. But if you're taking action from a place where it's the next brave thing to do that is a little outside of your comfort zone, but you can do it, that's the direction to head. And one thing that I do that it's kind of a new app that I've been using that I found helpful for when I'm feeling myself resisting sitting down and taking the action or doing whatever the thing is that would move me forward in my project. And then, suddenly distractions come in from all angles and I, want to check Facebook. I want to do my laundry badly, whatever, like the things that get in the way. An app that I've been using that I really like is something called Forest, like a grove of trees, forest. And I like it because it's dead simple. And it's essentially kind of like a little game where you set an amount of time that you're going to stay focused, or in my case, just stay off my phone because my phone is such a distraction for me. And you can set it for, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever. And then it doesn't allow me to use my phone without breaking out of the app. And the app, to make it enticing, has this scenario where you're essentially growing a tree. And if you give up before that amount of time that you've committed to is over, then the little tree dies and it's sad. But if you make it through, you get points. And when you get enough points, then apparently the app plants a real tree in a real place for real people. So that is a tip that I can recommend and I found works surprisingly well. The idea is just committing to a piece, a block of time that you're going to devote to that next scary right step that makes you want to throw up a little bit. So if you can relate to this concept, if you find yourself also in that place where you're talking about things, but getting stuck when it goes into the action part and wondering, are you going to be able to see it through? Are you going to have the skills? Will you will you show up and do the work over a period of time? These are questions that we can get into that we don't have answers for because we need action. So what do you need to do to get into action? I recommend that you break it down, you pick what scares you, and then you put it into the smallest action that you can still do and focus on just doing that piece. And then you go to the next piece and you go to the next piece and trust that as you make your way, you will be able to figure it out. But you can't make your way unless you start and unless you believe that you have a shot at creating something. Because for other people to even see your creation, to know it exists, to want to be able to support it, to buy into it, to literally buy it, it has to be there. And it's not going to be there unless you decide that you're going to create it. So moving from talking into action is a really, really critical piece of that. And I get that it's not easy. I get that it's not going to be solved in a short Facebook Live video. So for any of you that are in that spot, I would love for you to comment below. Tell me, would love for you to share with the rest of us a little bit about what it is that you're wanting to create and what you're up to. I'd be happy to follow up with you and have a conversation or give you some recommendations as to what can support you in doing this thing. Because what I really believe is that whatever this idea is that you've got in your head, this creative concept, and it could be something like a film or something artistic. It could also be something like building a business. But if that idea keeps coming back to you, and most of the people that I talk to about this is not like something that's just been fleeting for like the last couple months. It's an idea that comes back to you again and again over a period of years. And we can talk about it for years, but until we find a way to be brave and find a way to just take that next right step and get into those actions, then we're not going to be able to give that to the world. Nobody gets to benefit from that, least of all you. So it is one of my favorite things to help people with and favorite conversations to have. So comment below so I can support you in that and get excited with you, because I love hearing about these projects and I really believe that the world needs them. All right, dears, lovely to be with you, and I will see you guys next time.